Okay, is there any special brown that you like? I got some because I saw several recipes with it and I just did not like the taste of it. It tasted nasty to me.
I just get the Bragg's.
Bragg's? Okay.
Mhm.
Anybody else?
We just get it in bulk.
Bragg's.
Market of Choice or Fred Meyer.
All right.
And
Thank you.
Trader Joe's has a good stuff too. A bag of
Good.
nutritional yeast. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Does take a little getting used to. If you're expecting it to taste like cheese, it doesn't. But you just after you've used it for a few weeks and that's all you use instead of cheese, you just kind of get used to the mouth feel of it and the texture of it, and it's a good replacement.
Okay,
I've
thank you.
been trying to get used to it on air popcorn, but I don't like it still. Other things, it doesn't bother me, but if it's just on the air popcorn instead of butter, I can't handle it.
You gotta sprinkle a little, spritz a little water on the popcorn, or sprinkle on the nutritious yeast, and then spritz some little spray of water on it, make it stick. And then you mix it up, and you might put just a dab of salt if you need that little buttery, because butter has a little bit of a salty taste. And it tastes good. It's great. It's better. I like it as well as the butter on it.
But it doesn't taste like butter. We found that every time we tried to mimic a taste like butter, to taste like cheese, or to taste like whatever meat it is, it never does. Once we took that out of our mind and looked for it tasted good, then we did real well. But when somebody says it tastes just like, it kind of turns us off right there, because we've never found anything that tasted just like.
I heard
know,
something this week. Somebody said you don't have to love the taste of everything you eat. And that was helpful. You know, because you
It
make,
sure helps though.
I spent the time making soup and, you know, it turns out, and I love soups, but the soup was just kind of, it was really a good soup, but it didn't have all the flavor I wanted. But I just told myself, well, you don't have to love everything you eat. So that did help.
It takes time sometimes with certain recipes, and certain recipes you might, that's not a keeper, and other ones are that's a keeper, and just kind of trial and error. It's that way with any way you eat, any cookbooks you buy or try. It's going to be some wins and some losses. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Anybody else have anything you want to share?
No, I don't.
I might be able to fix that.
It doesn't matter.
Hey, Virgil.
I gotta go off to another meeting tonight, so.
So give us your line now then.
Yeah, well, I don't have a line yet.
He'll be back before the movie's over, we hope.
Oh, okay. I say, you know the line I'm talking about at the end of class. What do you want to say at the end of class?
Yeah.
These stairs.
I've just kind of caught the conversation on foods that taste like. We haven't got. You might get some that kind of mimic it. Nutritious yeast, I think, on popcorn, I can kind of get it doesn't taste like cheese, but it's kind of mimics it in a way for me.
It satisfies the need for him.
Yeah.
I don't think it tastes like butter or cheese, but it does taste good, so that's fine with me.
That works that way. But I don't agree that you have to like everything you eat. I'm not a fan of not liking. I'm not a Charlie. He says you get used to it after a while. Well, I don't know. So I got to doctor it up somehow. We keep trying different things to add flavor. I have some peppers, ground up peppers. That adds flavor to everything.
Hot peppers that I
Hot
grew in the garden. Don't ever put them in a blender. I gagged myself for 2 days afterwards with the powder in the air. Not quite that bad, but I thought I was going to die for about 20 minutes.
Tahine is another new spice that we were introduced to. It's not new, but new to us, which has the peppery and a little lemon and can add a little bit of a little citric. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
What is it you make with the chickpea?
Yeah.
The chickpeas, what do you make? Hummus?
Oh, I make hummus all the time, yeah.
Yeah, we've been, in place of butter, I've been using hummus on my bread. And then Marilyn made a, what was that spread you made?
Oh, an artichoke
Artichoke spread.
with the,
And I use that in place of butter because I'm an old bread and butter guy, but I'd have to cut back on the fats. So that worked real good. The hummus works real good.
and the artichokes was with the raw cashews. And the not marinated artichokes, Charlie. Don't look at me like that. There was no oil in it.
That's delicious on.
It
We're
is
getting pretty good about watching the oil stuff. That's been a biggie.
I'm getting upset that I can't hear a single thing.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no,
Not me.
that's not you. It's not that there.
Yeah.
I might see a new name or two now. Is anybody new that wants to
Hey,
introduce?
Lori, do you know where?
I'll go.
I don't see.
So
I'm unmuted, but I can't hear them. I think they can hear me.
we can hear you, Catherine.
Well, that was interesting. Hey, Doug.
So maybe, can you hear anything now? Catherine? Okay, well, the wonders of modern technology.
The last call, anyone new that wants to introduce themselves and how they found out about the class? I think I see a couple new, maybe one new name, two new names.
Oh dear. Well, I'm unmuted, but I don't see anything. I mean, they can hear me, but I can't hear them.
Yeah, I'm gonna go over here. Go here.
Here we go.
We're gonna mute the microphone. How's that? Okay. So everybody seems to be muted at this moment in time, except Scott and myself. And again, we don't want you to be shy. We want you to speak up and say hello, and if it's kind of the first or second time, and how you found out about the classes. All right.
Want me to take it away? Are we ready to go?
Yeah, I think it's time to go ahead. This is an important night, and glad you could all make it.
Oh, goody, they can hear me. I can't hear them, so.
Okay, go ahead and mute everyone, Charlie.
Yeah, I'll have to kind of do that intermittently. Maybe, let's see, how are we going to talk with Catherine to make sure that she's doing okay here? Yeah, Nancy, thanks for giving her a note to re-log on. Okay, Ken, do you have anything that you wanted to say?
Oh, I was just saying that black bean dip, it's got several things in it, but they're all, they all sound like things we eat, like vinegar and some juice, and there's no monosodium glutamate or salt or sugar in it added. So it's sure delicious, that black bean stuff. I think I got it at Market of Choice or Whole Foods.
Is it black bean dip or black bean hummus?
That one's black bean dip. but I do eat a lot of hummus. The black bean dip's better.
Okay, well. All right, well, hummus is just crushed up. Usually could be garbanzo beans, could be other things though. There's hummus made of lentil and other kinds of things.
Well,
White
there's
beans.
there's a lot of spicy hummus that I've found that I like.
Well, keep it up. It's healthy. Remember, a quarter cup is like a serving of half a cup of beans, quarter cup of hummus. And
Oh, I probably eat too much.
okay, well, you seem like you're not gaining weight or anything like that, yes?
No, I'm staying steady.
Then you probably are not eating too much.
That's good to know. I thought maybe because I ate so much all my life, I got some illnesses, but probably not. You never
Well,
know.
It
How
could
much
be-
saturated fat's in it?
Small amount.
Black bean dip?
Yeah.
I have to go look.
You're gonna keep him honest, Jerry.
All right, well, I better get rolling here. Let me share my screen here.
Okay.
You can see it okay, I'm assuming. I'll
I
let
do this all the time
him
with Scott.
come back and say he's
We're
back.
gonna mute this. Okay, I think we have everybody kind of muted now.
Oh, unmute. You can unmute for a second, Ken, if you want to, if you had the results of your,
No saturated fat.
okay. So some beans and nuts and seeds have a tiny amount, but yeah, beans are, yeah, really low in fat.
Okay,
All right, so this is kind of the second part of, I had my first part a few weeks ago, as those of you remember, of the calorie density part of weight management, and we had Charlie's weight management last week. And, do you have everyone muted?
I'm gonna have to do that again. Yeah, it looks like everyone is muted here on mine.
All right.
Okay,
All right. So tonight we're going to talk about food addiction and behavior change. So the food addiction I've done before, but behavior change is actually new, brand new material that I've never presented before to the class. So, so those of you here, hopefully it'll be that have been here before. Hopefully you'll learn something new. Let's start off with this slide. Substance abuse has many forms. So kind of a shocking picture there. But a lot of us can relate to that. So first, before we talk about food addiction specifically, we're going to talk about something called the motivational triad. And there's a book related to this called The Pleasure Trap, which is in the book list on the website. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But I'm just going to explain to you first off, kind of from a biological perspective, what the motivational triad is. And it's three components: seeking pleasure, avoiding pain, and conserving energy. And so kind of the best way to describe this is no matter what kind of animal you are, even microscopic beings, parameciums and different bacteria and all the way up the food chain, all the way up to humans, and every living animal especially follows this motivational triad. And so we all are motivated by this to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. And so it's not really part of our frontal lobe where we kind of reason with things and think through things. It's just kind of a natural instinct that we have. And so a good way the example I like to use to kind of demonstrate these three aspects are, say you're out in a field and you're hungry and there's a bunch of apple trees around. And so you look up in the tree that's right by you and you see a pretty ripe looking apple. Looks like, ooh, that looks like it's ready to pick, and it looks like it's easy to reach and it's right there. But then say, about 50 yards away, you actually see another apple, and it looks like it's even more ripe. It looks even more appetizing. But what we tend to do naturally is we're going to grab the apple that's the low-hanging fruit, so to speak. It's right there. You don't have to have much effort. You're going to reach up and grab that apple, even if that apple maybe isn't quite as ripe and as enticing as the one that's 50 yards away. Because the one that's 50 yards away, it's higher up in the tree. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to walk that 50 yards. You're going to have to climb up that tree, and you're going to have to risk getting hurt and falling out of the tree just to get that apple that maybe is a little bit sweeter than the one that you had that was just right there. And so you want the pleasure of the apple for the calories, but you want to avoid pain and you want to conserve energy. And so that's kind of what our natural instinct is to do with just about everything that we do. We're motivated to do things, but we also want to have that pleasure. We want to avoid getting hurt, having to avoid pain, and also conserve as much energy as we can. That's why the McDonald's drive-through is more enticing than having to go home and cook a meal, right? Because you don't have to make much effort. You just pull up, give them your debit card, and in comes the food, and it's pleasure. There was no pain involved. You didn't have to expend any energy. So you can see why marketing for anything, you watch commercials, just everything we do in advertising, and is all kind of taking advantage of this motivational triad. This is what we want to do as humans. And so we have to use effort, and we have to use thought to kind of fight against this all the time. So this is just, can I keep this in the back of your mind as we talk about food addiction, and even as we talk about forming habits and behavior change a little bit later on. Anyone have any questions about what the motivational triad is? That makes sense. And Charlie, you can just tell me if there's anything in the chat as we go, okay?
Yeah, no chat comments so far.
And then another kind of a more extreme way to look at it. So here's the book there, The Pleasure Trap by Doug Lisle and Alan Goldhammer. And kind of the more extreme way to look at it is basically food addiction or drug addiction. In this example, it's drug addiction. So they've done many studies where using rats as the study hosts, and they'll put like cocaine in a little dispenser, and the rat figures out how to push down a lever, and food comes out, and they try different things, like here's food, here's a entrance into a cage where there's the opposite sex where they can mate. And so they have these different things to entice the rat to push a lever to make something where it's going to cause it to actually have pleasure. So whether it's food, whether it's to mate, or in another case with cocaine. And each thing is a little bit more addicting, or more of a reward, basically. And so it gets to the point where it will pick, once it gets exposed to the cocaine, it'll actually choose the cocaine every time, even to the point where it can choose cocaine, or it can choose food, or it can choose mating. And it'll choose the cocaine before it will choose food or choose mating, and to the point where the rat will die from starvation because it doesn't get any food. It just keeps going for the cocaine every time. So it's just an extreme version of this pleasure trap. So you can so hijack the pleasure center of the brain so much so that you'll won't worry about conserving energy. You won't worry about avoiding pain, because you would think that would protect you, because, well, you got to eat to live, to survive. But the dopamine and the pleasure hits so high, and it so hijacks that pleasure trap that you will perish, basically. So that's just an extreme example of the pleasure trap and the motivational triad, how that can get hijacked. So that's another thing to think about as we talk about addiction. So I'm going to show a couple of Dr. Greger videos here. And they're basically, the first one's about sugar and how addicting it is. And then the second video I'll play right after that, it will show some of the science about how fat is addicting too. So let's watch these two videos.
People have chewed coca leaves for at least 8,000 years as a mild stimulant without any evidence of addiction. But when certain components are isolated and concentrated into cocaine, we've got a problem. The same may be true of sugar. People don't tend to binge on bananas. It's perhaps the reason we're more likely to supersize soda than sweet potatoes, why we're less likely to overeat this kind of corn compared to that kind of corn. The overconsumption of sugar-sweetened diets has often been compared to drug addiction, though this parallel was based, until very recently, more on anecdotal evidence than on solid scientific grounds. But now we have PET scans, imaging technology that can measure brain activity. It all started with this publication showing decreased dopamine sensitivity in obese individuals. And the heavier they were, the less responsive they appeared to become. We see the same thing in cocaine addicts and alcoholics. This would suggest that a reduction in dopamine receptors is associated with addictive behavior, irrespective of whether it's due to food or to addictive drugs, as seen in substance abusers. Dopamine is considered the neurotransmitter primarily involved in the pleasure and reward center of our brain, helping to motivate our drive for things like food, water, and sex, all necessary for the perpetuation of our species. It was healthy and adaptive for our primate brains to drive us to eat that banana when there wasn't much food around, but now that fruit is in loop form, this adaptation has become a dangerous liability. The original Coca-Cola formulation actually included coca leaf, but now perhaps its sugar content may be the addictive stand-in. Like the tobacco companies and other drug lords, have been able to come up with products that tap into that same dopamine reward system. Why a picture of a cheeseburger rather than sugary soda pop? Well, now we know fat may have similar effects on the brain as well. You feed some people some yogurt packed with butterfat, and within 30 minutes, you can start to see the same changes in brain activity you get when you drink sugar water. People who regularly eat ice cream, sugar and fat, have a deadened dopamine response in their brains to drinking a milkshake. It's like when drug abusers have to use more and more to get the same high. Frequent ice cream consumption is related to a reduction in reward region responsivity in humans. They're talking about the pleasure center in the brain, paralleling the tolerance observed in drug addiction. Once we've so dulled our dopamine response, we may subsequently overeat in an effort to achieve the degree of satisfaction experienced previously, which contributes to unhealthy weight gain. What do fatty, sugary foods have in common? They are energy-dense foods. Maybe less the number of calories than their concentration. Consumption of a calorie-dense diet compared to the same number of calories in a calorie-dilute diet leads to that numbing of the dopamine response. It's like the difference between cocaine and crack. Same stuff chemically, but by smoking crack cocaine, we can deliver the kind of a higher dose quicker to our brain. As an aside, I found it interesting that the control drink in these milkshake studies wasn't just water. They can't use water because our brain can actually taste water on the tongue. I didn't know that. So they had to use artificial saliva. They made people drink a solution designed to mimic the natural taste of saliva. Ew. Anyway, with this new understanding of the neural correlates of food addiction, there have been calls to include obesity as an official mental disorder. After all, both obesity and addiction share the inability to restrain behavior in spite of an awareness of detrimental health consequences. Now, that's one of the defining criteria of substance abuse. You keep putting crap in your body despite the knowledge that you have a problem that is likely caused by the crap, yet you can't stop. Redefining obesity as an addiction, as a psychiatric disease, would be a boon to drug companies that are already working on a whole bunch of drugs to muck with our brain chemistry. For example, you give people an opiate blocker, like they do for people with heroin overdoses to block the effects of the drug, and people eat significantly less cheese. It just doesn't do as much for them anymore when their opiate receptors are blocked. Rather than taking drugs, though, we can prevent the deadening of our pleasure center in the first place by sticking to foods that are naturally calorically dilute, like whole plant foods. This can help bring back our dopamine sensitivity such that we can again derive the same pleasure from the simplest of foods. And this is not just for people who are obese. Yes, when we regularly eat calorie-dense animal and junk foods like ice cream, we can blunt our pleasure center and overeat to compensate. But when our brain downregulates dopamine receptors to deal with all these jolts of fat and sugar, we may experience less enjoyment from other activities as well. That's why cocaine addicts may have an impaired neurological capacity to enjoy sex, why smokers also have an impaired ability to respond to positive stimuli. Since these all involve the same dopamine pathways, what we put into our body, what we eat, can affect how we experience all of life's pleasures. So to live life to the fullest, what's the solution? Well, the food industry, according to some addiction specialists, should be given incentives to develop low-calorie foods that are more attractive, palatable, and affordable so that people can adhere to diet programs for a long time. No need. Mother Nature beat them all to it.
Was anybody shocked about the cheese and the, any questions about that with the opiate receptor blocker? That's Narcan or naloxone. So it's a drug actually prescribed to reverse heroin overdoses, and a lot of times people that take high doses of pain medications are prescribed that drug naloxone because it blocks the opiate receptor. So the reason for that is because cheese actually has the main protein in cheese is casein, and it gets converted into your body to casomorphin, just like morphine. And so it's obviously not as strong as morphine or heroin, but because it hits that receptor, the Narcan, the drug, blocks that. And so you just, doesn't seem to give you that much pleasure to eat the cheese when you take that. So a lot of you that are having a hard time giving up cheese or dairy products, that's one of the reasons. All right. So let's talk about food addiction versus food issues. So there's some definite definitions here, and some of them kind of blend together. So I'll explain. So typically a normal eater, if I don't know how many of normal eaters are out there, but normal eaters, when you get overweight, you use willpower, kind of reason with yourself and use willpower, make different food choices and lose weight. So that's ideally what we would have, but I don't think there's probably that many people out there that fall just solely in this category. Just because, for an example, the next category is an emotional eater, and this can be a spectrum for emotional eaters. Because think if you're a normal eater, but then something really major happens in your life. You break up with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or a family member or friend dies, or something really major happens. A lot of us will go to eat something sweet or something, a treat, right? We'll go to that, and because it makes us feel good, because it, as you saw on the video, it does hit the dopamine receptors, the pleasure receptor in your brain, so it makes you feel better, it soothes you. And so but then after the stress passes, you might just go back to being a normal eater. But then there's other people that, whether they're having a bad day or a good day or almost kind of any typical day, they might fall into this category of an emotional eater, where they're essentially thinking about it as, when it's more extreme, using food kind of like medication. So it can be that way with alcohol, with drugs, with foods that are high in sugar, salt, and fat, and really high in calorie density, because they don't act naturally in our body to just give us nutrition and sustenance, but they're there because it stimulates that dopamine and makes you feel good. It's self-medication, basically. So there's a big spectrum there, and then that can bleed into actual outright food addiction. So whether you're an emotional eater on that spectrum, a normal eater, or an overall food addict, I think there's probably a lot more people that have food addiction than we realize. And that's just something that's not really talked about much in nutrition programs, diet and weight loss programs and things. And the kind of when you have a real severe case of it, you really need to treat it with the same support and offer the same support and intensive treatment as you would with an alcoholic or any kind of a drug addict. Because you think about it, it can be just as powerful. And so, you kind of, when you think about like what Dr. Greger said in the video, if you're having health problems and you can't, and you know that the foods you're eating are causing your health problems, but you can't stop. I mean, that really is by the DSM criteria, which is the criteria that he showed there, is where psychologists and psychiatrists, that's the criteria they use to make diagnoses, mental health diagnoses. And so that really, it really needs to get the same attention as you would need to treat alcohol and drug addiction. You need to treat that for food addiction too. And again, it's the foods that are high in sugar, salt, and fat, the foods that are highly processed, and that can give you this can show that you have this problem. So what do we do? So yeah, is there someone not muted? I'm hearing some background noise there. You can check for me, Charlie.
Yep, I'll check.
So the first step is to first detoxify. So think about how you would treat somebody that's addicted to cigarettes, nicotine. They're an alcoholic. They're using heroin. They're using methamphetamines, cocaine. I mean, all the different drugs. You don't ever tell like those of us that are medical providers, like Charlie too, or anyone that's trying to tell somebody, hey, you shouldn't smoke. And when I see a patient that's smoking and they're trying to quit, I don't tell them to, oh, well, just cut down, just go from 3 packs a day to 2 packs a day, or an alcoholic. You don't tell an alcoholic that's a pure alcoholic, you don't tell them, well, just have a beer on the weekend, just have one or two. So you have to use that same philosophy with someone that's a food addict. You don't tell them, well, just have, one cupcake or one piece of pizza, or just a little bit, because that can send someone with a food addiction, that can send them spiraling downhill. They might have been abstained or stayed off the drug, the trigger, for quite some time, and then if they're getting pressure from family or friends, hey, there's this birthday party, there's this Christmas gathering, you need to eat, why don't you eat this? They get, you need to have the same respect for somebody that has these issues. So the first step is to detoxify and learn about the disease. And often there's a lot of psychological issues that are involved with it, just like with any other addiction. And it often takes a long time. It can take months to years of being off of the substance, whether it's, again, food or alcohol or drugs, before you actually understand what are all the underlying issues that go with the addiction itself. And so again, it's so important to have support, have a mental health professional, have lots of friends and family that understand, to be able to help you with this. And these are some of the kind of the highlights from Dr. Tarman's book. So I have it listed here on the slide, and this is also on our class website. So Vera Tarman is a psychiatrist, and she wrote a really good book. It's called Food Junkies. So it's kind of a little bit kind of a funny title there, but it's a really, really good book. And these are just some of the highlights from the book that she has there. And she says food addicts are always in recovery, which you always hear that with alcoholics as well. And there's just kind of this growing body of literature and attention being paid now to food addiction. It kind of, even probably 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't a lot of credence to it. It was like, yeah, maybe it's this kind of thing that's out there in the ethos. It's not really, but that wasn't very well documented or well studied. And now in the last few years, there's a lot more literature. There's textbooks about it. There's lots of good literature about it and good studies about it now. So it's really is a thing. And so it's starting to get some attention. So yeah, so identifying those and avoiding those food triggers, just kind of realizing that you kind of need the same support that you would need for any other substance abuse, substance addiction. So I think that's the kind of the keys to that particular book. So some recommendations, having supportive friends and family, consider some behavioral health counseling. And then some other books that I recommend besides Food Junkies is another one called The Craving Mind by Judson Brewer. He's also he's a psychologist actually. And this is also on the website. And this one's really good as far as kind of, you know, he talks a lot about his PhD, his studies were in mindfulness, which we've talked about in some of the other classes before, but, you know, mindfulness is just kind of being aware of how you're feeling, what you know, what kind of talking yourself through, whether that's through journaling or just talking to yourself, taking a time out when you're actually feeling a craving for the substance, you know, in this case, food addiction, kind of being mindful of, okay, I'm feeling this craving. Why am I having this craving? And you kind of actually kind of ride it to the shore. He has this analogy of riding a surfboard on a wave to the shore. And it's a really good book, especially the first half of it. The last half of it, there's a lot of science and studies and stuff in there, but the first half is, I really recommend, is good. And so it's just another book will help you kind of, even if you're not maybe if you don't think you maybe have full food addiction, but maybe more of an emotional eater or anything. It doesn't have to be just with food. It could also be with, you know, with more exercise and you know, just reducing stress and all the other things we talk about in lifestyle medicine. And you're wanting to change a behavior, it's also gives you some mindfulness tips on how to make changes. So that's also a good book that I recommend. So any questions about food addiction before I go on to behavior change? Any questions, discussion, anything in the chat, Charlie?
There's one question, does too much salt give a dopamine rush?
They don't have, at least I haven't seen any data on that, any literature on that, but we all know people, and we do know that salt also kind of, people crave salt. And I mean, salt is the one food or mineral that when we're deficient, we crave actually. So if you've been sweating a lot or whatever, and maybe not eating, if you're eating really, not salting anything, eating lots of fruits and vegetables, not eating any processed foods, and it's in the middle of summer and you sweat a lot, if you actually, in that situation where you could potentially be low in sodium, that's the one mineral or one food that we actually crave physiologically when we're deficient. So, but as far as, you know, people go to, you know, you think about what foods would you go buy at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're craving something, right? It would be something that's sugary or salty or very fatty. So, you know, some people are sugar people, some people are more fat people, some people are more salty, crave things that are salty. But, you know, say like French fries or potato chips, those are high in salt, but also high in fat. So, but not high in sugar, where some people crave those types of things, where other people might crave, you know, cake or cookies or ice cream or things like that, which are sugar and fat. You know, there's very few things that are just high in sugar and not high in fat. I mean, you'd have to, I mean, I guess you could say like, you know, a candy cane, or I don't know if how people would, or just a hard candy or something that's going to have sugar, but not really, or fat or salt. So I don't know, you know, I guess I'll leave it to my wife, Angela, to maybe explain that question. Because to me, it's like, well, how often do people crave things that are just sugary and not fatty? Because I mean, I think it's probably not necessarily one or the other, but
If it's all there is, you'll eat it.
yeah, I guess if it's all there is, you'll eat it. But yeah, any
Hank
other
has a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a comment. We've all heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's a kind of a useful thing for a lot of people to get support from friends and family. Back when I was in college at UCLA, they had another group called OA, Overeaters Anonymous. And they claimed to have the very same 5-step program or whatever they had for AA, and they claimed to be very successful. And I knew some people who were in it, and they were very supportive of each other and seemed like a good deal.
That's great. Yeah, I know. And then Vera Tarman's book, Food Junkies, she does talk about the 12-step programs for food addiction. And there are programs around, I can't recall where they're at right now, but there are a few programs around the country that people will enroll in for food addiction. So I think that's the important thing. The takeaway I guess I wanted to for sure leave you with food addiction specifically is it's more prominent than we realize. it's kind of taboo. It's not really something that's spoken about a lot. We always just, I know I'll speak for myself in the medical profession, and Charlie can chime in too, that kind of the way we're trained in medicine is, it's like, oh, if you're obese and it's because you don't have any willpower, it was your choice. You just, you just need to not eat this food and eat this food instead, and exercise, and you won't have all these health problems and be obese. And we know it's not that simple. It's something that needs the same attention as someone that's an alcoholic or a drug addict. We would never treat somebody that has a food addiction where so we need to treat them the same rather than different from somebody that's an alcoholic or a drug addict. And they need the same support. And it's even harder in a lot of cases, because think about it. I mean, an alcoholic can just stay out of parties and stay out of the liquor store, but we all have to eat, right? And so we have to create the environment for that person to help them be successful. We wouldn't someone's an alcoholic, you're not going to drink a beer right in front of them and say, oh, look at what I'm drinking. Don't you want some? Like we do with food. It's really awful. So I think there's another hand up.
Yeah, Sandra, you have a comment?
Yeah, question. I'm thinking about bulimics and anorexics, and when they start eating, it seems like it goes into food addiction. Is there a reason for that, and physiologically?
Yeah, so anorexia and bulimia are, get their own category. So I mean, sometimes there's different reasons that they use the food. So it's not necessarily, I don't think it's kind of the same thing as far as they're not doing it for the dopamine, like chasing the dragon, so to speak, where they're getting the high to eat all that food. It's more of a compulsive behavior to treat an underlying, psychological problem or something. It's more, they don't want to gain weight, so they eat all the food, and then they know they're gonna, for bulimia, they're gonna, throw it back up, and it's kind of more of a stress coping mechanism, more so than say that they're addicted to the high sugar, salt, fat food. But there could be some overlap and whatnot. But I know they, like in that book, Food Junkies, she does talk about bulimia and anorexia too, and how it's kind of related. But it definitely needs special attention, special counseling and therapy.
Yeah, well, for myself as an anorexic, I noticed once I got that under control, then I went to food addiction. And many of the people that I'm familiar with who no longer are, have dealt with the psychological issues of it, seem to just go to food addiction and become quite obese, because it doesn't seem like, I don't know. That was my question. More than in the anorexia, I can see that it's not related, but in the healing process of it, when you're healing, I don't know if you're ever healed, but when you're healing, it seems like then we go to, those of us with that problem go to addiction.
And it's really common for a lot of people to go from one addiction to another. So they might have been an alcoholic before, but now they're a food addict, or they go to something else, or gambling, or sex, or something. There's a lot of addictive behaviors that just get transferred to something else. They might get over one addiction, but then it goes into another one, and so that can be difficult. Any other questions? Comments? All right, let's move into behavior change. So this is a quote by Carl Rogers, an American psychologist. "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change." A little thought there. So behavior change, there's 5 overreaching themes with it. And they kind of can blend together, and they're all very important. And so when you're thinking about a behavior change, whether it's, diet change or lifestyle change, any kind of change you want to make in your life, it's important to have a why, to have a motive. So motives is the first block. And you remember from the first class, Charlie and I's first classes, we talk a lot about your reasons for change and to have your why reasons. And that's motive. And you have to have motive to initiate a behavior change. That's the first. And then another is self-regulation. And that essentially means is just being, it's a little bit kind of a, kind of some truth, some harsh truth here is that, we sometimes when we want to make a change, we even if we have motives and have a reason to, a lot of times we'll think about reasons why we can't, like, oh, it's going to be too hard, or somebody else isn't going to support me, or it's we kind of think of reasons why we might not be able to do it or might fail. And so self-regulation is kind of taking responsibility for yourself. So I'm the captain of my own ship. I have to kind of take responsibility for myself, my own success. I have to take ownership of it. And so that's a really important aspect of it as well. So you kind of just have to say, no one's putting food in my mouth, but even if they want me to eat it or they cooked it for me, I'm feeding myself. And so, or I'm the one that goes and does the exercise or does the meditation, or watches less TV, or whatever it is you're going to do for your health. You have to take responsibility for it. So that's one of the main themes. And then resources are very important, and that's why you guys are here in the classes. And so having resources is, okay, I got a list of cookbooks, I've got a meal plan, I've got I get my kitchen cleaned out and set up ready to go to make these changes. I got the walking shoes. So you kind of have your resources to make the behavior change. So that's very important. So you have the support, the resources, everything you need. And then habits, which I'm going to talk about a little bit in just a little bit, it has its own category as well. So we'll talk about that. And then also environmental and social influences. So this is probably one of the more important things. And I just got done talking about self-regulation as far as taking ownership for your own changes, but you still have to be in a supportive environment to sustain a change. And so what that means is, setting yourself up for success, having friends and family that support you, other social influences as far as, going and living life outside of your home. So having your home set up as your kind of your safe haven, that's really important. So you have all the right choices all around you. The good choices, the easy choice, that's all very important to set up your environment. But then the social influences are basically when you're outside of that, and friends and family that might try to influence you in some ways. And it can be scary for people, as if any of you in the class, have, spouses that maybe you're doing this on your own and they're not going to do it with you, or family that's not really supportive of you. They're accepting of you doing it, but they're not going to do it with you. And so the environment might be a little more challenging. And then it can be hard for friends and family sometimes, because your identity, we kind of think, what I've learned a lot over the years, I've been doing this 9 years, is that your lifestyle, this whole food plant-based lifestyle, and your total lifestyle has changed so much that it kind of changes your identity in some ways. So you're a different person than you were before, and you'll likely become a different person. And a lot of times that unknown is really scary for your friends and family. They might not be supportive just because they feel like, well, how's this going to change our relationship? How's this going to change your personality and how we interact with each other? Because so much of our culture revolves around what we eat and whether we exercise or not, what we do. Basically our activities are so tied in with our culture, and that can be really scary for friends and family. So I think these kinds of things are important to think about as you're thinking about a behavior change, whether you're just thinking about changing or you're already in the middle of it. I think these are all important things to think about. So next I want to talk about the 6 stages of behavior change. And so we can kind of go through these and kind of see, you can kind of think about where you're at in this process. So the first stage of behavior change is pre-contemplation. And really what that means is you don't have any awareness, you lack awareness. And so most of you here, everybody pretty much here in the class is past this stage, because you're you're aware, you know that what we eat and how we move and the chemicals we choose and all the things that we talk about in lifestyle medicine, you're aware that these things have big influences on your health. And so you already have the awareness, but the other part of the pre-contemplation is you think that the benefits of your current behavior, so let's say you haven't made any changes yet, you haven't switched to a whole food plant-based diet or made any changes in your diet or lifestyle yet. And even though you might have awareness now, you may or may not still think that the benefits of your current behavior, your current lifestyles outweigh the downside of not making a change. So it's think the pros of current behavior outweigh the cons of not making a change, or the health risks. And so the balance is tipped towards, basically, if you're making a list, you might be thinking, well, there's more benefits to how I'm living my life now than what the downside is if I have a bad outcome, if I have a heart attack or a stroke or develop diabetes,
43
or take a bag full of pills or whatever it is. So that's essentially what pre-contemplation stage is. But most of you are probably at least into the next stage, which is contemplation, which just means that you're aware you need to make a behavior change. You realize that you still might not be sure about the pros and cons quite yet, but you at least know I'm aware I need to make a change, and this is where I need to go. So that's contemplation stage. And then the next stage, as you're advancing, is preparation. So you've decided, okay, I'm going to make this change. I'm planning to make the behavior change. So you're kind of setting yourself up for success. You're thinking about, okay, let's get some cookbooks. Let's make a plan here, and let's kind of set a date for when we're going to start doing this. So that's preparation stage. And then the next is action stage, which you're actually doing it, implementing the behavior change. And now at this stage, you for sure think that the cons of the previous behavior outweigh the pros of the previous behavior. So now you flip that, and so now you know that there's more likely you're going to receive more benefits than, so the benefits outweigh the risks. Basically, you now are convinced that, because you're putting into the action stage now, and you feel like, okay, now it's time to do it. I'm ready. I'm going to benefit more now, and you're basically saying that the risks of not doing anything, that the risks outweigh the downside to maybe making the change. And that action stage can go on for a long time, but then you kind of blend into the maintenance stage, which means you're doing the behavior change, you're trying to maintain it, and you're just trying to prevent a relapse. So you're trying to just set yourself up, and then you kind of prepare for, okay, what will I do if I have a relapse? So you kind of make a plan to, not, you don't plan to fail, but you kind of set yourself up for, okay, so what happens if I don't make the right choice? What do I do? How do I get back on track? And so that's where your maintenance phase can kind of go on for forever, basically, especially if you have food addiction issues as well, because you're always kind of have a kind of a reconnaissance plan, or you have to have it set up so that you know what to do if you get a challenge or you fall off the horse. Basically, you got to figure out how to get back up and get back on the horse. And so that's what, and then termination and relapse is, just failure to maintain the behavior change. But hopefully nobody will have that last for very long. It's always, we always say, I always tell patients, think of it one meal at a time, one day at a time. So you don't have to necessarily think too far ahead, but just kind of don't beat yourself up if you make a poor choice. Just get back up and say, instead of turning one bad meal into a bad day, into a bad week, into a bad month, that does a lot more damage. But if you just say, okay, I made it, that wasn't the best choice, what's my next meal going to be? Okay, I'll do better next meal. So you kind of just take the successes, pat yourself on the back when you have a success, and then when you maybe don't make the best choice, don't beat yourself up. Just say, okay, that's a learning experience. So when you have a failure, it's a learning experience. When you have a success, then you want to celebrate that. So that's always think of it in a positive way. Never judge yourself or beat yourself up if you make a bad choice. So those are the 6 stages of behavior change. You can think about where you're at with those. Let's talk a little bit about habits, because that's where ultimately one of the pillars there of behavior change. So habits, I mean, we all kind of know what they are, but I think these are some good little nuggets of information about habits. And so a habit refers to how you perform an action, not what the actual action is. Now it's kind of hard to kind of understand what that means, but I just think about all the different habits that we have. And this next bit of information that is that 43% of the time our actions that we do are habitual. And so just as an example of one I was thinking about to give you guys as an example, and we all have lots of these, is think about like for me, I always brush my teeth when I get out of the shower. So at night when I get out of the shower, I brush my teeth. So it's not that the actual action of brushing my teeth is the habit, it's how I perform the brushing of the teeth. It's basically, I get out of the shower, I reach for the toothbrush and I start to brush my teeth. And so it's like, I don't even think about it. So you don't even, it's not like when I'm in the shower and getting out of the shower, I think, oh, I need to brush my teeth. It's just, without even a thought, I reach for that toothbrush and I brush my teeth. So that's a habit. So the actual, how the action occurred was really what the habit is, not the actual action of brushing the teeth itself, if that makes sense. So habits are something that we want to develop because we want it to be just automatic. We don't even want to think about it. And so the important component of how to develop a habit is initially you need to have a goal and a reward to build a habit. So goals and rewards are critical for starting to build a habit, but do not help to make habits stick. And so to get it started, obviously, like with diet and lifestyle, you're thinking, okay, I want to make all these diet and lifestyle changes because I want to feel better. What your goals are. I want to feel better. I want to get off medication, whatever your motives are. Those are your goals and rewards for the habit. But some other information about habits is there is a big disconnect between what we know and what we do. And so it's not enough to just know. I mean, you have the information, you know why you're trying to make this behavior change and why you're trying to develop a habit, but just knowing won't be enough. And then another is that in taming a bad habit, knowledge and willpower are not effective. And this is all based on data of long-term behavior change studies. And so just knowing is not enough. And just, when you're trying to get rid of a bad habit, just having the knowledge and the willpower is not going to be effective long-term to get rid of a bad habit and to adopt a good, healthy habit. So we need more than that. And really what we need is repetition. So our mind is not picky, just give it repetition, rewards, and context. So again, the rewards and context are important to get it started, but to get a habit to stick, we just need repetition. So habits form when we act repeatedly without planning or deliberating. We just keep doing it, do it over and over and over. So habits come from repetition. Behavior begets behavior. You just keep doing it, it'll start happening with more and more with more ease. So just kind of think about, even if you're like, you're not even really sure, you just keep doing it over and over, if you're thinking too much, sometimes you'll kind of think yourself out of, well, why am I doing this? So, it's good to have the motivation, but then at some point you just kind of keep doing it, even if it's, it's what you want to do, but if you start to stop and slow yourself down and think too much about why you're doing something, you can kind of talk yourself out of it. We kind of all heard about, had examples in our lives where we've done that, where we kind of try to negotiate out of it, or we try to rationalize it, and it's easy to talk yourself out of doing something that you initially had the motivation to do. So with a habit to form, you just have to you try to not think about it, you just keep doing it and keep doing it, and over time it'll start to stick. Just like athletes that everyone's watching the Olympics right now. So how did they get so good at skiing and doing all these sports and all these things? Well, it's just repetition over and over and over. Just like Charlie and I always talk about in these classes, and so many of you have been to so many of these classes so many weeks in a row, and you just keep coming back, because it's like we always say, it's like if you're learning to ride a bicycle or play a musical instrument or speak a new language, you just have to do it over and over and over. It's not like you can just, oh, read one book or, come to a few classes and then expect everything's going to change and it's going to stick. You just have to kind of keep doing it over and over and over. If it's the same information, do it over and over and over. And that's what studies show how habits form. And the other most really important thing is the environment. We talked about that earlier with behavior change. Environment, environment, environment. So building the right environment is key. You want to make the right choice the easy choice, and make the wrong choice a more difficult one. We call that disruption. So an example would be, you want your environment to be great at your home. You want it to be safe, right? There's no foods that are really high in calorie density. There's no foods highly processed with lots of sugar, salt, and fat in your home. And so if you were gonna have a relapse and get something, you would have to go out of your home and go buy something. Or with some of the plant-based recipes, there are some desserts that you can make in some of the plant-based cookbooks. And so you'd have to go out of your way to actually make something, cook something. So that kind of that's the disruption that takes you out of habit, right? So if you just, here's these Oreo cookies, I'm just going to eat those, and they're right there. Whereas if you have to, okay, I can make these whole food plant-based, cookies, and yeah, they're going to be a healthier version of the Oreo cookie, but it's still going to be a little bit processed. It's still going to have some sugar and whatnot in it. But because you had to think about it, one, you might be able to roll through that craving and decide, well, I don't want to make it, and I'm just here. I'll just be mindful and I'll avoid that. Or you might be still motivated to go ahead and make those cookies and have a few cookies, and at least it's a healthier version of what you would have got if you'd had the Oreo cookies right there. So it's just that's an example of building the right environment, make the good choice an easy choice, but also make, if there's a bad choice available, make it more difficult. So that's what the disruption is. Okay. So if we persist to do something, even though we don't value the reward as much, or the reward is no longer available, then it's a habit. So it's just an example of, because think about, you need the reward to kind of get started with the habit, but then if you're not really getting the immediate reward anymore. So say you've already been on a whole food plant-based diet for a while, and you kind of almost even, sometimes you might even forget, after a while, you might even forget why you're still eating the certain foods you are, or the certain activity you're doing, but you've done it so much and so repetitiously that you start to you forget really in that moment that you're doing the behavior. You're not even really thinking about the reward or the reason you're doing it as much anymore, because now it's just a habit. You don't even think about it. It's just second nature. And that's when you've developed a habit, is when you're not really getting the immediate reward anymore, but you're still doing it. That's a habit. And that's from the Good Habits, Bad Habits book by Wendy Wood, which is another book I recommend, and it's on the class website as well. So I think that is all I got for that. Before I move, Angela comes and speaks, anyone else have any questions or comments about behavior change or habits? I know it's a lot there. Anything in the chat, Charlie?
No. There were a couple comments, no questions per se.
I can add something.
Yeah.
Okay.
A while ago, I heard an interesting study that NASA did with habit forming, and when the astronauts go up and they don't have gravity, they have a problem with their visual perception. And so they designed some glasses to wear, which turned, upside down, because they were seeing things upside down and wrong side. And they had to wear them for 27 days straight in a row for that to normalize, so that their brain and their eyes could see things in the correct, upside down side or downside. And if they missed even one day, they had to start all over and do it for 27 consecutive days for for our brains to get into the habit of seeing things correctly. And that's helped me a lot in my own ability to change habits that I want to change, is that every day consecutively for 27 to 30 days, I usually go for 30 days. So I just wanted to share that as a little motivation factor.
Great, thanks. Anybody else?
I have an anecdote I could share.
Yeah, sure.
So I made the goal at the beginning of 2021 to start doing just workouts once a day, every single day for a year. And so the way I did that completely by accident, the reward I gave myself was a second cup of coffee, which, as it turns out, is incredibly important to me. Because after a while, it's not like, oh, I have to do this, do that. It's like there's a wall in front of the coffee pot, and it won't move until I've done this thing. It's not like, oh, I could cheat or just for a day. No, it's like it's not physically possible.
Oh my God. Well, thanks for sharing. All right. Well, I'm going to have Angela come speak now.
All right. So how many people are here?
43.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Scott's wife. I'm Angela. And for some of you that might be here, some old school folks that maybe used to come to the classes at the church, I used to be there when we used to do those in-person classes. I was the tech person. I was the one in charge of making sure the PowerPoints worked and everything went well. But I'm not a regular participant here on these classes. It's Scott's world, and I let him do that. But this class in particular was one that I used to speak at when we used to do the in-person classes. And it's because it's something that's very important to me and a very personal thing for me. And I'm happy to talk tonight because I really want to hopefully share my story to maybe help some folks that may be struggling with this issue of food addiction. Or maybe there's someone in your life that maybe is struggling with that, and maybe this will help you understand them a little bit more. That's my motivation for doing that. And so why is it just?
Oh, they see you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like not very Zoom smart. So I just see Charlie's face really big. And so I'm like, that's what I'm seeing. And so I'm like, is everyone just looking at Charlie? I don't know how that works. Okay. So apparently Scott says you guys see me. So that's a good thing. Okay. So I have some notes down here in front of me. So I'll be looking down at those to keep myself on track because I can kind of go on tangents. So I want to make sure I'm staying focused. And so no PowerPoint with this. This is just me blabbing. So hopefully you all handle that okay. So Scott might have mentioned in his introduction class that when he started doing whole food plant-based eating, he did it alone for the first 3 years. And when he started on this journey, he said, I'm going to do this thing. I've done this research. This is amazing. And I'm really going to try this to make myself better. And I said, you enjoy that. I'm proud of you, but there's no way I'm doing any of that because the thought of eating a whole food plant-based diet was so completely opposite of how I ate. And I did not in any way think that I could ever do it. I grew up in a very meat and potatoes family, and that was what I liked to eat. And as we, our lives together, having children, busy, I was working, he was working. There was a lot of fast food going on in our house, which our kids didn't mind. And sadly, I didn't mind that much either because it meant that I could come home and not have to cook something. It was as Scott talked about, it's that path of least resistance, the easy thing to do, the low-hanging fruit. So the thought of changing that so drastically that there was no way that was going to happen. So he was on his own for 3 years, cooking for himself, which which was hard for me to watch sometimes because he really had no cooking skills. So there was a lot of times when he would try to make a stir fry. And if anyone that does some cooking knows, you don't always put all the vegetables in a stir fry in at once because some take different cooking times than others. Maybe chopping the vegetables, he'd have some way bigger than, I mean, it was just, yeah, there was a lot of piles of goo that he was eating, but he was doing it and he was enjoying it. And I was just staying out of it. But the thing that really started to motivate me, I guess you think of that list of behavior changes Scott talked about, contemplation. I stayed in contemplation for 3 full years because I'm quite stubborn. But he would come home and talk to me. Not only did I see his success, which I was so thankful for because he was so much healthier, felt so much better. He was so much better after the first year that he did this. But when he started helping patients and he would come home and tell me stories of, oh, I had a patient that started this and they're so much better and they're off their medications. And after time went on, I realized that this was something that I needed to do. And it was something that I knew that I needed to do for myself. But the reason why I hesitated, and I think for a lot of people that have done a lot of dieting will understand this, I had tried so many diets in my life. I had done all of them that you could imagine. I did Slim Fast, I did Weight Watchers, I did Atkins, I did all of them. And with every diet that you do, in my experience, all it does is lead to failure. And so when you're someone who looks at a situation where you might be trying to do something new, try a new way of eating, all I could see was the failure that was going to come at the end of it. And so to get your hopes up that something's going to finally work for you is really hard to do. And that was always sort of the barrier for me. But I decided after 3 years that it was time for me to try. And one of the reasons I really finally felt motivated was I definitely had food addiction issues, pretty strong food addiction issues. And I kept those private into myself. So even Scott did not realize that I had food addiction issues. I kept it hidden very well. Our boys, we have 2 boys that are grown now and in their 20s and away from home now, but they didn't know it. Scott didn't know it. I ate secretly and I ate when they didn't know I was eating. And that was something I kept to myself as an addiction, as an addictive behavior. I think a lot of people probably hide their addiction as much as they can, and I did. And so doing this was going to be hard because it was so drastically different. And it was probably going to make me forced to really maybe share with Scott and maybe with our kids what my real issues were. So I decided to do it. And I hadn't told Scott yet about the addiction, but I decided to go ahead and try this. And so I went all in. I didn't try to taper in. I just jumped in with both feet. And it was, as with anything that you start off at first, it probably wasn't too hard at first. I don't think it was. I think I had it was easy to follow initially. We did a lot of the things that Scott talks about probably in his, you've heard him talk about in his prior classes about creating sort of, what would you call it? The classes where you talk about how to meal planning. Thank you. We did a lot of hacks for things and transitioned into it pretty well. But for me, I had to really, because I was coming from such a place of bad food, I had to do a lot of hacks initially. A lot of it was like what Scott would call methadone. So a lot of processed foods, vegan processed foods. So I would do vegan lunch meat in sandwiches. I would do vegan cheese in sandwiches. And I agree with a lot of the comments that came at the beginning where people were saying how you try to, something that is supposed to taste like meat doesn't taste like meat. I totally understand that. Things that are supposed to taste like cheese don't taste like cheese. You have to I've had to let those things go. And that's no joke. And so I appreciate those comments from the folks at the beginning because I really understand that. I feel you. But for me, my big issue, my big addiction is sugar. That is my thing. Some people really have issues, as Scott said, with more the fatty, salty type of things. Mine is sugar. And so the biggest thing for me, the hardest thing for me was letting that stuff go. And as Scott said, one of his examples was how I dealt with that was by making whole food, plant-based things. And the real success with that is what I had to really realize was the reason why I was able to stay on this and be more successful than I was on anything else that I had done, any other weight loss program, was because every other weight loss program still had me eating all the things I was addicted to. Weight Watchers, I could still eat the things I was addicted to. It had a point value, and I could eat so many points of that a day. With Atkins, you could buy bars and different things, and I was still getting that fat sugar thing with them. I mean, everything that I did in a diet situation still fed those issues for me. But whole food plant-based took those things off my plate for the first time in my life. I didn't have those highly processed fatty foods on a regular basis in my diet. And that really was an overwhelming change for me. And it took time to really start to let go of some of those like bridge foods, the things that were the vegan junk food things. I had to let those things go, and it took time. And everyone's different. Some people may be able to let go of those things faster. Some people may have to hold on to them longer. Everyone has a different path to take. It took me a while, but I finally let go of those things. And I think the biggest things that I found for me that really were really life-changing is, for the first time in my life, I actually was able to feel, I think, what is supposed to be normal for a person during the day. Like I felt hungry. I ate food, and I know I like the comment that someone made at the beginning of class that he was feeling full every day. And that was really one of the things that I was amazing for me, to feel hungry, to eat and feel full, and then not eat again till the next mealtime, and be hungry for that mealtime, eat that, feel full, make it to the next mealtime. My life before was just a long series over the day of just eating a meal, eating in between the meal, eating before the meal, eating the meal, eating between, just eating all day, and not having that real sense of recognizing when I was hungry, recognizing when I was full. I don't think I was ever full for a long time. And I also, he made the same comment about not being able to eat as much. And that's the thing that I really found too, that my meals were much smaller than they used to be. And they still are. I mean, it's kind of funny, Scott still is able to eat a lot in one sitting. And I would, for a while, I would take portions that my mind would think I would be able to eat. And now I realize I can't eat that large of a portion anymore. It's just, it's really, my body is reconfigured in such a way that it's, I would say, whatever normal is based on what I used to be like, that is where I am now, I think, with my eating patterns. But I think what's important for me to recognize, and what I really wanted to share with you guys, is, as Scott said, once an addict, always an addict. And this is true for me as well. While I have, it's been 6 years now that I've eaten this way. And I have had success, I have had weight loss, but I have not reached a weight loss goal that I have in my mind that I would like to reach. And I'm still not there. And I think what's important about that is to recognize that while I still haven't achieved all the goals I've wanted yet, my overall health is so much better than it ever was. And I know that I have the potential through calorie density, which, if you've seen that class, I can't recommend that more, because calorie density is really everything. That is the key. If you're looking for weight loss, and those tools are there, and I have to work to make better choices. And I'm always looking to try to be better about calorie density. And I think for someone that's come so far, and the things I always battle with, every step along the way was always, okay, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to, look how much I gave up to eat like this, right? The things that I don't eat anymore. And then it was, okay, now I eat some of these, like I call bridge foods, the things that are processed vegan that kind of got me through. Well, I gave those up. So there's all these things that I've little hurdles I've gone through to get to where I am. And there's still hurdles that I need to do to achieve the weight loss that I want. but and I know the things that I need to do calorie density wise. But all of us, we all work to get to that place, and we all have. For some people, it's easier than others. And Scott always says I have a little bit of a cards stacked against me. For me, particularly because I've had such food issues, and weight loss is so hard by this point of my life. I'm not a spring chicken anymore. So we all struggle with that. But I think one of the big things that I wanted to share tonight was, as much as I really thought I was in control of everything and I had a really good grasp on this, I think you can't underestimate stressors, as Scott said, that they can really affect your food addiction. And I can't think of a bigger stressor than a 2-year global pandemic, which really did in a huge way affect me as a person with food addiction and emotional eating. So as I've heard many people make the joke about the COVID-19, meaning the 19 pounds you would gain over COVID. I would have to say that that was exactly what I gained during COVID. So I didn't coin the phrase, but I lived up to expectations in a wonderful way. So that's exactly what I gained over the course of COVID. And it wasn't because I went out and got Big Macs and Whoppers or things like that. And I think that's really a testament to what Scott talks about habit. I firmly had given up eating meat and eating dairy and eating those things. That habit was already ingrained with me. That was not something that was going to change for me. It was the calorie density that was the problem. So when I talked about how when I really wanted sugary things, I would make something at home, as Scott talked about. Oreos are vegan. People love to say that. And could I at one time have eaten a whole package of Oreos in a sitting? Probably pretty close. But by not having that food anymore and making a batch of whole food plant-based chocolate chip cookies or something like that, the problem was during COVID, I made a lot of batches of whole food chocolate chip cookies, and I made a lot of batches of a lot of things. I ate a lot of stuff that was whole food plant-based, but way off the calorie density chart to get through that. And I think that was just a great reminder for me, and a great realization that yes, there's going to be stressors, probably maybe not as big of a stressor as this has been the past 2 years. And my father died towards the beginning of COVID as well, not from COVID, but so yeah, there were some big stressors that were going on that really fed I wanted to feed the things that I was feeling. And while those things happened, I think the most important thing is I wanted to make sure you all thought about is that once you've made these steps and had some success and make these changes and get this habit forming, my hang up is sugar. Your hang up may be something else. Maybe it is meat, or maybe it is cheese or something like that. The thing that I always want to emphasize to you is every day that I make the choices I make and the habits that I formed about what I eat, what keeps me going in this, even though weight was so much of the focus for me and my food addiction was a focus for me, I am making choices every day that are giving me control over things I never thought I would have control over. So every time I make a choice to not eat meat or eggs or high density, high calorie, high fatty foods, I'm having control over feeding cancer. I'm having control over not becoming diabetic. I'm having control over heart disease. I'm having control over so many things that I truly believed that I was just a victim of. Those things were going to happen to me because anyone that ages in this population, that's the norm, that's the expectation. Those things are all going to happen to me, and I don't have any control over it. And learning about this and embracing the knowledge that Scott has gotten, and listening to Charlie and Ross all these years, Charlie Ross and Scott all these years, is about knowing that in all these habits and all these choices, in making the whole food plant-based choice, I'm doing so much more for myself than just dieting. I'm potentially saving my life every day by these choices. And so even someone who's a food addict, even someone who has so much of my life was so not eating a vegetable. Oh my gosh, I think now how the thought of eating a Brussels sprout would have made me gag, but I love Brussels sprouts. So, you know, if anybody could come around to a Brussels sprout like I did, you can really make changes, and it is possible. And I'm so thankful every day that I have this knowledge and I have this choice and I have the ability to make this choice by having this knowledge. And I think I just wanted, always my motivation for talking and sharing about this in the class was, I mean, Scott, I love him, obviously. We've been together for 34 years, but he did this in 1 year and lost all the weight, and he's been maintaining it for years, right? And so my example, and I like to share, is because that isn't always everyone's outcome. Not everyone can do this in 1 year and have miraculous results and maintain it for 9 years. We all sometimes have a longer journey and more of a struggle, but every step you can make in this way, everything you can do to eat this way is only going to enrich your life and make you healthier every day. And so I'm so glad that you are here and that you are able to get this information and have this knowledge. That's the most important thing to me, is that everybody has a chance to know this and make that choice. And I hope that you are motivated to keep going, because it's so important to keep going every day. So is there anything else I missed, Scott? Okay, Scott says no. So thank you all I appreciate your time and for listening to me. I feel pretty passionate about the food addiction thing, and I hope that if there's somebody in your life that has this and has this struggle, you can hopefully support them. And if it's you that has this issue, I hope that you can just keep putting one foot in front of yourself every day, because it's hard. And I'm living proof of that. It's very hard, but it is possible. And this diet, if you're on the fence about whether to do it, please take a chance on it, because it can really make a difference in your life. You okay? Oh, Scott says I need to say any questions or comments.
I have a comment.
Oh, hi.
Go ahead.
I just want to say that thanks for your talk today. My brain tends to think that I'm either a success or a failure. And your talk just made me feel that I'm really pretty normal, because I have a lot of gray area in the middle. So thank you for that honesty.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And I think that's, for me, that's always a struggle. It used to always be a struggle, because even when I would have success on a diet, and I would eventually gain the weight back that I lost, because it would end up failing. Even if I didn't gain all the weight back, it was always a failure. It was always a failure. And I think that's the biggest thing I've learned from this, is that, have I reached the goal I've wanted? No, but you have to look at what you've done and where you've come, and how much impact you've had on your health already. So yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you.
I just have a quick comment.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you, Angela. I really enjoyed your story, and I think it just helped me remember that not everyone's going to lose weight as fast as the next person, and so it was nice to hear your story.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's my motivation. I mean, when I used to give this talk at the church, I used to laugh and tell everybody that my goal in life was never to be in front of a group of people and tell them my deepest, darkest secrets of secret eating and food addiction. But I just feel that's just kind of what I felt that was important, because I felt, as Scott said, a lot of this isn't talked about. And I felt it was really important, as uncomfortable as I might feel sometimes talking about it, if it can help somebody maybe realize that they're not alone in this. And it's helped me, because when I sharing this, I heard from other people that I am not alone in this. So it's helped both ways.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see says people have raised hands. I don't know how that works.
Hello, Virgil has his hand up, but he'll talk. He always wants to talk. So I thank you very much. I agree, it's not easy always. And there's some things that I sometimes think about. A big juicy pork chop. Marilyn shakes her head and says, "Don't say that."
No, it's true. It's
You know,
true.
that's the truth of the matter. Is that I've thought about that. I don't want it,
Right.
but I think about it. You know,
100%.
we started. We're over a year and a half now at this, and
Oh, good.
and meat's really not a priority for me anymore. I'm of any kind,
Yeah.
but it does pass my mind occasionally. I mean,
Well,
because I like to cook. I do have cooking skills, so I like to cook, and
I didn't.
That's
So
what-
I'm so glad you do. Poor Scott. It was like I had to crash course myself in cooking, and it's getting better. See, Scott tells me he's over there. He's like, you do good. I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to say. But it is getting better. It is getting better. But I totally agree with you. I think there's so much memory. That's the funny thing is you think of all the years you ate the way you ate before you've done this. I think about I've done this for 6 years. I don't like to do math at my age, but there was a whole lot more years that I ate a different way. And it's hard. It's hard to let those memories go. And it's all tied up with so much. As I said, a meat and potatoes family, my mom's thing that I made the most that I loved as a kid was roast beef. She would make a big roast beef and mashed potatoes and gravy. I mean, that was,
Oh, I know it.
Oh, if I would have, like, if someone would have asked me before if I was going to be on a, what's your last meal going to be? It would have been that. I mean, that was home and everything. So those memories don't go. And so I hear you. You think about those things. I do. But yeah,
You have to learn. You have to learn over on how to cook. It's a new way to cook, so.
It is.
But it's doable.
It is.
I'll get off so someone else can share.
It's Dolly.
Hi.
I think I am going to go clean out the kitchen cupboards. I have just a few things left behind because you never know,
I hear you. I hear you.
Trash comes 2 days, so they'll be out there in the trash can. Thank you for your talk. I so enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm glad you did. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's definitely it's easier
Tremendous.
if you could
Sounds inspiring.
Oh, thanks, Charlie. If you could imagine what it'd be like to live with Scott, all of you that gets this class once a week, you would think it would be, it's not, you definitely can't have anything in the cupboard around here. I'll tell you that.
Angela, that was just such a powerful statement, so inspiring. And I just can't thank you enough. You inspire me to want to teach even more classes. And all I can say is I wish the medical students could hear you also. And thank you so much for doing this. There's so many people in the class have made so many comments about how this is helpful. They see the reality of, the problems that they get touched with that I haven't had the experience, or even Scott may not have had the same experience. We haven't. And so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. And I'm glad to do it because I feel that too. I feel like it's not, as much as it's hard to be the example of somebody with a lot of issues, I'm happy to do that.
We all have a lot of issues, Angela.
Yeah. Thank you. That's true. I got to remind myself I'm not the only one. All right, Scott, come back. Yeah. All right, let Scott come back.
All right, and then next week we'll have is open forum format again, so we can talk about any of the last 3 weeks, the calorie density, Charlie's weight management we talked about last week, and then tonight. So, and if people have more questions or comments, Angela can be available to comment some more or answer questions if you have questions next week for the open forum.
Wow, that was great. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, welcome.
I'm glad she's recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. She's she's glad. Huh?
Oh, man. Okay, that's going to be a hard one to top, Scott, for the next, for both of us.
Exactly.
So we'll just ride along with it. That was wonderful. Okay, everybody, we will see you next week, and hope you all have a good week.
We'll see you in the movies.
Okay.
You'll see you in the movies.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good
Thank
night.
you.